Good morning, everyone. Welcome to What's Working with Remote Language Training in BC. My name is Julie Ship, AMSA's Language Program Manager, and I'll be facilitating today's webinar. So I'd like to first acknowledge that AMSA's offices are on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. In the work that I do supporting federally funded training programs on this land, I'm making time to learn from and share available resources on decolonizing education and teaching civic engagement with a place of awareness of this reality. There are 3 BCIT modules on Indigenous peoples, colonization and decolonization. And the link to these was shared in the June 16th release of Settlement Net. So if that's something that you're interested in learning more about, you can check those out. I'd like to acknowledge that this and thank the Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada for funding this event. So I'm very excited to introduce this panel, amazing panel of LINC teachers from 4 different regions of the province in BC. The speakers that we have for today are Sika Patton, who is joining us first from the Vancouver Island region. And then we'll jump up to visit Marilyn Ang in the north in Prince George. We'll come back down to the lower mainland and connect with Jas Randhawa in Abbotsford, and then back up to Elizabeth Leston in BC's interior in Kamloops. And Sika is also joining us from Victoria. I don't think I mentioned that. So I will now introduce Sika Patton. Sika has worked at ICA since 2011. She has taught levels from literacy to LINC 8, but has spent most time as a LINC 1 instructor. Sika has also been the part-time head instructor at ICA since 2017. She currently teaches a LINC 1 seniors class, and she'll now share how she got this class going online and what resources and tools work well with this group. So take it away, Sika.
All right. Thank you, Julie. Today I'm going to be talking about how I got my LINC 1 seniors class online and what I've done to support them online. So my class is made up of 60 to 80-year-olds. And I know from experience using computers in class that some of them are quite comfortable and capable, and some of them feel quite overwhelmed and frustrated when using computers. So I wanted to approach my online class carefully. And so first I sent them an invitation by email, and it had instructions on how to get on to BC Meet. So that's an open source video conference software like Zoom. And I sent the instructions in their languages and also with pictures. And so I sent these out and then waited to see who would show up on the first day. And on my first class, I had 2 students, and that was pretty good. But I checked in with the other ones during the week, or some of the staff members who speak their languages checked in, and I talked to children and grandchildren and talked them through the process. And then at the next week, I had 70% of my class online. And since then, we've had almost 100% attendance. So there were some limitations for my students. So for example, many of my students don't have a personal email address. They might have a family member email address. So that's why I chose Jitsi Meet, because you don't need an email link. They can just type in the name of the class and get straight online. Many of my students don't have computers. They might have tablets or smartphones and spotty Wi-Fi. So there are some limitations in what we can do. And also, of course, the computer skills and the comfort level are different for some. So we introduced the technology in stages. I started with our Jitsi Meet class for a couple weeks until everyone was comfortable with that. And then I tried sending some emails. So some of them have personal emails. I sent that to them or to their family members with some activities and links, and that was successful. So after a couple weeks of that, we moved on to try EduLink, which I introduced in the class, and we went through and practiced some activities together. So they all managed to get onto EduLink, and some of them they've taken to it, and some of them haven't been as enthusiastic, but they have gotten on there and experienced it. And so it's a bit of a work in progress, that one. So in class, I've divided my group into two smaller groups. So I spend an hour with each group. So there's about 4 students in each group, and that gives it a bit more of an intimate feel. They get more time speaking and a little more back and forth. So that seems to work well. Most of what I do is screen sharing, so giving a lot of visual supports to what we're doing in the class. And I'll talk a bit later about some of the different things that I use for screen sharing. So the focus is mainly on listening, speaking, and reading. I found writing a little more difficult. We do a little bit of this, you know, with new words, copying new words and finishing sentences, but I find mainly listening, speaking, and reading works the best. And then the asynchronous work that they do is mainly a review of what we've done in class. So if we do a reading or a worksheet or listening, then I'll send that to them or post it on EduLink for them to practice again later. Because especially with the seniors, lots of review is really important for increasing the retention. And we have done a couple of assessments. We did a listening and a speaking assessment, which I did one-on-one. So they had an appointment to come online, and we did their assessment one-on-one, and then I gave them the feedback right there, and that seemed to work pretty well. So as I mentioned, I do a lot of screen sharing. And so here, these are some of the things that have worked for me. ESL Library has got a lot of great picture dictionaries that work for Link 1 students. And so we've done some of those. And then whenever I do anything in my class, I usually do a video recording. So using a screen recorder so that I can send it to the students and they can practice again later. So ESL Library is great. It does have a fee, but there's a lot of great resources, and it has some digital and some paper resources. So if students have printers, they can print some things, or we do some of the digital activities together as a class. You can even sign up your class and have them log on and practice online, but my students, that was kind of too much for them at this point. So we just do it together in class. Reading A to Z also has a lot of great resources for Link 1 students. It's mainly geared toward children, but there are some books that work for adults. And so we've done some, and they start at very basic level. So you can get different kinds of resources. And then I often will do a video of it and send it to my students after. And then, of course, the Bow Valley College literacy readers are great. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with these. And they also have an audio so that students can practice later. They can get in and practice their listening as well. These are a few more of the resources that I use for screen sharing with my class. Live worksheets is something I've discovered recently, and it's got a lot of great interactive activities. So there's some basic English review, and you can use ones that are pre-made, or you can upload your own PDF or Word documents to make interactive materials yourself. And these can be embedded into EduLink or send by email. So they've got a lot of great review activities. And then Quizlet is a great resource for vocabulary review. So whenever we learn new vocabulary, I usually make a Quizlet set, and you can review the vocabulary in different ways. So we will often do this together as a class, and then I can send them the link or post it on EduLink, and they can review again later. So it will present the vocabulary in lots of different ways. And then another thing I've discovered recently is this Learning Circles by BBC. So it is British English, but I've found that the accent's not too strong, and as long as the vocabulary fits, they work really well for this level. So they have a lot of settlement-based videos for that work well for Link 1 students. So we've done all of those things. And then the other thing we've worked on and has been somewhat successful is using EduLink. So all of my students have gotten on to EduLink, and some of them have really taken to it and spend a couple hours every day on there. And the other ones need a little support to get more comfortable with it, but we're working on it. So on my EduLink site, I've added the literacy resources, not the Link 1 resources. I find those too high for my learners. So the literacy resources, plus I also add in the homework or the study that we've done during the week, so they can access it and review it. So it's organized by week. Yeah, so those are the things that we've done together as a class. And then, so we always go through all the activities during the class, and then the students can review and practice on their own later. So that's what we've been doing in my seniors class. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Sika. That's fantastic. And please send your questions in for Sika through the question box or email apodal@amsa.org. So next up, I'm going to introduce Marilyn. Our second presenter is Marilyn Ang, and she has been teaching LINC to adult learners at IMSS, Immigrant and Multicultural Services Society of Prince George, for the past 4 years. Prior to IMSS, she taught English to students who attended the college and international schools in Prince George. And she's currently doing graduate studies at the University of Calgary in educational leadership with a focus on homeschool partnerships. This, I think, is just so interesting. And anyone doing a PhD while teaching LINC during this time is a star in my mind. Marilyn is going to now share what's working with her very digitally literate 5 to 8 class. So a little bit of a jump from working with seniors now to the stage 2 learners in the LINC program. So please take it away, Marilyn.
Thanks, Julie. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here this morning. And this is the areas I'm going to share with you this morning. But before I thought I start sharing with you about what has really worked for me, I thought it would be nice to tell you some and give you some background about my class. I have about a total of 13 students in my class, and several of them had been, working as professionals before ever coming to Canada. And when they came here, one of the things that they said to me was that, they desired to attend the college as well as the university here in Prince George. Prior to lockdown, my class, I've always set my class assignments that required them to use both their laptops. Additionally, my class is also well informed about COVID-19 because it was a topic I did with them before the lockdown took place. So as a result of all these I found have facilitated a lot of my online learning activities that I'm about to share with you in a moment. Here are some structures that we put in place to help support my students' online learning during COVID-19 period. We have a WhatsApp chat group, and this was set up prior to COVID-19 to facilitate communications amongst my students and between them and myself. And following lockdown itself, this communication mode has been so widely utilized, extensively between myself and the students, and we also use emails and Zoom calls. Also, both my teacher assistant and I have set up daily office hours so the students could reach us using any of the means to get support or help for their online assignments. Also, for hardware, they could borrow a laptop if needed from IMSS. Google Classroom is the main platform that I've used to communicate, create assignments and assessment to track my students' progress. At the same time, it's also allowed me to create many types of online assessments and activities for them. And one of them is discussion board, which I really found to be pretty beneficial for my students. To begin with, I found that this online activity has helped my students to sharpen their critical thinking skills. They also taught them to consider different points of views as well as to reflect on the comments that they read on the online discussion boards. At the same time, this platform has also helped them to improve their writing skills, and in particular, I found that this has really sharpened their ability to write a very good paragraph for me. And especially for those who are really quiet in class, this activity has given them a voice in class, as I found that they were more willing to participate in such activities than they would if they had to do a face-to-face activity in the classroom. And finally, this activity has helped to build an online learning community. Here's an example of a discussion board that was given to my students. In this assignment, they had to watch a video and respond to the following questions. How do you handle your groceries during COVID-19 outbreak? Is it similar or different to what you have seen in the video? And what are some new things that you would have learned from this video? And here's a typical example of a discussion forum that my students and I have. Students are usually given a few days to read and respond to each other. And you will notice that I'm also participate in the discussion forums with my students. And for those of you who are really interested in starting one on Google Classroom, I've actually prepared a handout to show you how you might do it. And I think Julie will sort of like distribute this to you later. Other than the discussion board, another activity that has worked well for me and my students is videography. So far, I've used this to get my students to showcase their creativity, hone their speaking skills, as well as teach them how to present their ideas in a sequential manner. And here's an example of a speaking task that I've given to my students. Before they did their own video, I scaffolded this activity by first getting them to watch 2 videos on how teenagers had to spend their time in isolation. Then they had to do online discussions on the 2 videos they had watched. And the purpose of these activities was to really provoke them to think about how they spend their own time in self-isolation before doing their own video. And to also help them create and upload their videos to Google Classroom, I posted related YouTube videos so that they could watch how these were done. What they finally submitted to me as part of their speaking assignment really surprised me because it was of such high quality. Not only were the content very well thought out and interesting, but the video produced was so clear and so well edited. And watching each video gave me a good insight of actually how they were coping with lockdown. And it also showed me that they were able to follow instructions, although this was not part of my assessment. And the feedback that I got from my student recently was very, very positive. That they told me that they really enjoyed doing this activity. Another online platform that's really well for me is Quizlet. It's a free online tool that generates different study modes, and specifically for me and like Seeker, I usually use it to introduce my students to vocabulary before I start a new topic or get them to work on a reading text. What I really liked about this online tool is that you really need to input minimally. That is, you just need to supply the words and definitions, and Quizlet automatically generates a study set that includes different study modes and a quiz for your students to do. Here are some various study modes that Quizlet generates for each study set you create. There's a matching activity component along with writing, spelling, and a test component to ensure that your students actually master the vocabulary that you have identified for them. This is an example of a vocabulary assignment that I created on Quizlet for my students based on their reading text, how to protect yourself from coronavirus when doing grocery shopping. And as mentioned earlier, for Quizlet to generate the various activities, all I did was to identify the vocabulary words I wanted my students to learn and then enter these words along with the definitions in the Quizlet template. And Quizlet then generates the different activities that you can see on the left-hand side of the PowerPoint slide. What I usually do is I always get my students to do the first 5 activities, and then I get them to send their quiz grades to me once they've completed the quiz component. So this gives me a kind of an idea of how well they have mastered their vocabulary. And the final online tool that I really found very helpful is the use of Google Form. It's one of the options that Google Classroom actually offers to help teachers create their online assignments or assessments. And so far, I've used this tool to help me create several of my listening and reading assignments and assessments for my students. And what I really like about Google Form is that this online tool allows my students to track their work progress. It also allowed them to see their grades immediately and also the feedback that I leave for them. So this is just showing you, if you are using the Google Classroom, where you can locate Google Form. And this slide is just to show you the multiple options available to you when you use Google Form. It is here on this particular site that you also input your answers and feedback to the students other than type out your questions. Okay, so here are the examples of questions that I created for an online reading assessment for my students. Note that if you are teaching multiple levels like me, Google Form allows you to make a copy so that you can modify on the second copy. Again, I've included this in my handout for those of you who are interested in how to create Google Forms in Google Classrooms. To conclude, while online learning lessons are time consuming to create, they have actually helped my students to continue learning in an engaged way during the COVID-19 pandemic period. But more importantly, I think they have helped them to become independent learners. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Marilyn. That's fantastic. So we're going to do a Q&A, a short Q&A period right now. So before I introduce Jez, please keep sending those questions in, and thank you so far to those who, thanks to those who did send questions in so far. So I've got some questions for you both. I'll start with you, Sika, because your questions came in first.
Okay.
So someone wanted to clarify the resource that you mentioned after Quizlet. You did mention quite a few resources, so did you want to just list them off again? Somebody also asked about the live worksheets. It was, what was the name of the live worksheet site? So maybe you could just run through those resources one more time.
Okay, live worksheets is liveworksheets.com, and it's got lots of great resources for basic to, I guess, pre-intermediate English learners, and you can make your own resources. So that's a great resource. Quizlet, which Marilyn also talked about, is a great resource at all levels because you just put in whatever words or things you're working on. And that's quizlet.com, I think. Reading A to Z is a paid subscription, but they do have many levels, so from very beginner to upper intermediate. So it's something that different levels can use. ESL Library is a Canadian-run website, I believe, esllibrary.com, and they've gotten into a lot more digital options lately, so it's can be very useful for online teaching. And the other one was on YouTube, and that's the BBC Learning Circles, and they're very simple, basic scenarios for settlement language learning. And they are British, so it's always good to run through it first and make sure it works. But I've found several of them that do work for my learners. I think that was it, and then EduLink, yeah.
Okay, so there's another question for you. Sika, do your students have somebody in their home to assist them with the technology? And how did you connect with them, if so?
Yeah, at the beginning, yes, we phoned or emailed family members mainly, so children and grandchildren. Grandchildren are great. And so they were there to set them up. But once they got set up after the first week, most of them are able to use it independently.
Perfect, thanks. So I have another question for Sika, but first, Marilyn, somebody wanted to confirm, did you say your class size was 13?
Yes, 13.
Okay, so Nellie, yes, that was correct. She said her class size was 13. And another one for you, Marilyn, how is learner privacy maintained in the WhatsApp group as phone numbers are shared when a group is created? There are, I know, a lot of different tools and platforms that are out there that people are using, but what are you doing in that situation to protect privacy?
This is done with the consensus of the students. They didn't mind it. They found it was a very good way to support one another. And it was something that they used to communicate with one another before pre-COVID period. And after, when the pandemic broke out, they found it so helpful because they could text their friends, and ask for help if they couldn't access us. They could text each other, and then and sometimes I found it very useful because they text me personally if they were having some IT issues, and so I could actually instantly see it. So that particular platform is only used for work and nothing else. So, but it's done with consensus of the students, and they really found that a very helpful way to get in touch with me and with some of their peers, and keep connecting during this period in time, so that they don't feel so self-isolated. Yeah.
Okay. Another question is there a fee for? And do students need a Google account to use Google Classroom? So yes, you do need a Google account to use Google Classrooms. And as far as I know, there's no fee. Did you want to add to that, Marilyn?
No, there is no fee, but what they have to do is to create everyone has to create a Gmail in order to be able to access anything on Google Classroom. That's all. Yeah.
Yeah. And I should add that Google just recently came out with a toolkit for teachers of all of the suite of their tools, and you can access that by none other than Googling it, and you just look up toolkit, Google toolkit, and you'll probably find that. It's got information about how to use the entire suite of all of their apps. So it can be very handy because they all work together as well. And just let's take one more question before we jump into the next half, and we can come back to the questions we didn't answer. We'll save the question about tech for later because that's a little bit of a deeper discussion. But let's see here. Sika, this is also privacy related. How can we ensure security privacy on a platform that doesn't use email? I'm not sure if you have a response to that.
Right. Well, Jitsi Meet, that's the video conferencing software that we use that's similar to Zoom, but it's just instead of using email link, you have to put in the class name. So in order to ensure security, you have to make a class name that's not easy to hack. And so we haven't had any problems with that.
Okay, that's a good tip, thanks. Yeah, and that was a question too that somebody had asked. Was it Jitsi Meet? And I wrote in the chat or the question box, yes, Jitsi Meet. So you heard that correctly, Susan. All right, so thank you both Sika and Marilyn. I do want to come back to giving you more opportunities to speak, and we have more time later to dig into some of these other pieces, like what about technology and access to laptops and things like that. And then maybe even too, just digging into those aspects of teaching a really low level class and seniors on top of it. We could maybe come back to some of that and how does that differ for what you're doing, Marilyn. But thank you both for your presentations. So we will now, let's turn off our webcams and then we'll move on to our next presenter. So our next presenter is Jazz Randhawa, and she's a graduate of Simon Fraser University, originally from Vancouver. She's a LINC teacher in Abbotsford, where she's taught for 25 years, predominantly in stage 1. So going back down now to the stage 1 LINC levels. Jazz will candidly share her journey with you of transitioning to online learning after having taught for so many years in LINC without it. And also she'll share how she builds community and friendships in her LINC 3 class. So take it away, Jazz.
Well, hello everyone. Welcome to my journey in digital teaching. Now, this is me 5 years ago, before COVID-19, before online teaching, and before PBLA. This is me 2 weeks ago. I think you get the picture. Teaching is stressful. March 2020, it's spring break. I'm dreaming about Justin Trudeau announcing the CERB. Instead, I got this. My dream was shattered. Online learning with low-level students with my own low-level computer skills. I used to handwrite my month-end reports 25 years ago. I thought learning about that paperclip symbol attachment was a big deal. How is it even possible? But after a lot of coaxing and bribing from my boss this past September, I had started my CLB students on EduLink in October. So I had 2 advantages. My students were familiar with EduLink, and 2, they were not level 1 or 2 students with even lower English skills. They had student numbers and knew how to access the website. They already knew how to open forum posts and how to open homework links. So I sent a forum post asking if they wanted online learning and what devices they had. To my surprise, I started receiving responses immediately. I had forgotten that my greatest strength as a teacher is my ability to build community, friendship, and acceptance in the classroom. Students feel safe and have lots of fun learning with their peers. They crave that atmosphere of kindness and love. So I set up a chat using Microsoft Teams and invited all the students and my trustworthy and reliable chair TA. I emailed them instructions and crossed my fingers. I had 4 students in the first chat, set up a second chat, and had 8 students join, and 11 in the third chat. But things were pretty chaotic in that third chat, as I tried to figure out which student had the noisiest background to mute. And then I pleaded with the student to unmute so that he or she could be heard. And that's when I sent another forum post through EduLink with some rules and quickly divided the group into 2 pods and started a routine where one pod met Tuesday, Thursday, and the second pod met Wednesday, Friday. For students who are isolated and lonely, these chats help them feel part of the community and help them maintain the friendships they had made in class. They were part of a larger group or family. In class, we played a lot of games, and Kahoot was by far their favorite. I learned about Kahoot from a practicum student years ago, and I love taking practicum students because of their enthusiasm, and they always end up teaching me something new. Kahoot.com, a free website, is where teachers go to make a Kahoot, which is basically a quiz with questions and 2 to 4 answers. Students play the Kahoot on kahoot.it. The game gives points for speed and correct answer. And at the end of the game, there is a first, second, and third place winner. I have a smart board to show the questions, and students can use phones or computers to click on the answer. Now, I wanted to incorporate Kahoot in online learning, but how would I do that? So I made a Kahoot for COVID-19 and simply read the questions and possible answers in our chat. Students wrote A, B, C, or D on their own papers, and we went over the answers together. It was great for listening practice, but students were disappointed they could not compete. One student asked for the link, and so I agreed and sent it after the chat. Found out some of the students were playing the Kahoot with their families and spouses, and some were using it to practice their reading skills or study for their future citizenship test. So every week, I sent them a new Kahoot. This is a sample of one. Now I even add pictures to my Kahoot. And once you make a Kahoot, you can use it again and again and add it to your own personal library. And I should also mention that for homework ideas, visit Janice ESL, spelled Janis ESL. Now, I don't know who Janice is, but she's one smart lady. The website is well organized with themes and topics and gives links to resources in reading, writing, listening, and speaking. Saves a lot of prep time. Now, this is no joke. These are my sanitation workers. They come every 2 weeks, and my dog just loves them. This story actually made the national news. And using my forum post, I sent the news story video link to my students and asked them to write a response about the story. I got some great responses, and some of them watched the news story many times. It's great when you can use real life stuff for reading and writing assignments. Surprises. Now, routines, I believe, are great. Chats and homework are always sent at the same time and same days. Students can organize their lives around class schedule. But life needs spice. So for holidays like Ramadan, birthday, Mother's Day, I sent them an e-card. For Earth Day, I found 2 great YouTube video links. One of the students said that her son received the same videos in his school homework too. A day before our chat, I sent a forum post with a meme of 4 men wearing masks and playing poker with toilet paper and hand sanitizers. It was a good conversation starter, especially since one of the men looked like one of my students who loves playing cards. A day after I sent my Kahoot on Queen Victoria, I sent them YouTube link to Mr. Bean Meets the Queen. We surprised a student by singing happy birthday to her, and students gave her their best wishes in one of our chats. It made her day since she had no other celebration. I've invited guests like Oprah and Obama, but unfortunately they had to decline. So I invited my volunteer and the students' former teachers into the chats. And after I correct their homework, I like to send a GIF or emoji. It just takes a little more effort, but students love it. Feedback. Nothing can replace that in-class face-to-face experience. Teacher, please let us come back to class. All the students would prefer to be back in class. They thought online was really hard, so much to learn, and they needed that face-to-face, in-person help from their children, spouse, or even neighbors. 3 of my moms had trouble focusing on our conferences because of their crying children. Some students only had a phone and tablet. They are now saving money for a laptop because they realize the importance of a computer. They realize that a computer is very useful to study for citizenship, to get their learner's license, or even buy things. When I asked them if they would come back to online, if that was all I could offer, they all overwhelmingly said yes. Why? Because any English is better than no English. They were grateful for the opportunity to continue learning. Their listening, speaking, and digital skills improved, and I give full credit to the students for stepping out of their comfort zone and making online learning a possibility. It's their willingness to want to participate and their efforts that made all the difference. For myself, I learned that there is much, 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 much more to learn. And being on the computer for a long time is draining. So I take this little guy for a walk to just get out of the house and regain my balance. And now I'd like to thank my kids for helping me with the PowerPoint, and Julie Ship for all her great tips. And most importantly, thank you so much for listening. This is the end of my journey, or maybe just the beginning. I appreciate your time, and now I'll hand it over to Elizabeth.
Thanks very much, Jazz. That was great. I love the narrative quality of that, and also just, again, your candor with it, you know, how this feels to get on to something new and challenging. So next up, we have Elizabeth for our last session before our final Q&A. And Elizabeth currently teaches LINC 2 to 5 at Kamloops Caribou Regional Immigrant Society in BC's Interior Region. She has a Bachelor of Arts degree in English Literature from Simon Fraser University and a TESOL Canada certificate. She has taught EAL for over 10 years in Taiwan, Russia, Mexico, Spain, Vancouver, and she worked in Toronto as an education manager as well. Elizabeth will now share 4 PBLA assessment samples, which I believe and understand are inspired by some of the Centre for Canadian Language benchmarks, multi-level lesson plans. So she can add to that. She's also going to share how to make a fillable form to support with some of your monthly student reflections or any other tasks that you'd want to use a fillable form for. So I'll pass it over now to Elizabeth.
Thank you, Julie. Let's see. So yes, I'm going to be sharing 4 assessments, 1 from each skill. I'm going to quickly show you an example of the assessment, and all of them will be available for you guys to download if you do want to check them out later. And I'm just going to explain the assessment, and then I'm also going to explain how you can deliver it in an online environment. And the theme is going to be going to the doctor and health. And lastly, I will show an example of a monthly reflection, but more specifically, I'm going to be showing you how to make a PDF fillable, and I'm going to be showing you 2 functions for that. And those are techniques that you can actually use on any document. You can use it for a worksheet if you would like. Okay, so the first thing I have here is a reading assessment. This is about how to search online for different types of clinics. So here I have looking for a family doctor, looking for a walk-in clinic, and also looking for a virtual appointment, okay, which I think is important, especially during this life that we're living right now. So what I would do in this situation is, of course, pre-teach any vocabulary about clinics, any vocabulary and skills related to searching online. And then to deliver the assessment, all I would do is just email the assessment to the students. They complete it on their own, and then they email it back to me. Okay, the next I have a writing assessment. This one I think is very common. It's just how to fill out a medical form. So I would pre-teach the vocabulary again, do any practice in class as needed or potentially as homework. And how to deliver it, I would just email the students the assessment and then have them email it back to me. So the next one I have is a listening assessment. Now this one is about listening to questions from a COVID-19 questionnaire. So by this I mean, for example, if I want to go to the dentist now, I can't just waltz right in. I am going to be pre-screened, so I'm going to be asked different questions about my health and also different questions about my personal history. Have I been in contact with anyone who has COVID, travel history, etc. So I thought this would be a useful and practical classroom activity that we can do. So in the class, of course, pre-teach any vocabulary and grammar and practice. And to deliver the assessment, you can do different things. So what I'm doing is I'm using Zoom. So Zoom has a feature called breakout rooms. So it's a separate room. So I'm able to go one-on-one with one student and then conduct the listening assessment. Another option that you could do is just in advance book an individual appointment with the student to do the listening assessment. It really depends on your preference and the platform that you're using. And also for the listening assessment, the teacher can just read the questions aloud, or you can always, if you do so choose this, have the questions pre-recorded by another person, just in case you want to have the students get used to another accent, another speaker. Again, it's only if you have the time and if you know somebody who would be able to contribute. And then what I did in my class was during the listening assessment, on my shared screen, I put up different images of different symptoms that I wanted to say that the student has. So they know, for example, if there's a picture of a fever, they need to answer yes. So that helps me gauge whether they actually understand the question. And it's also just a way that you know that you can more accurately measure the listening if the student actually comprehended the sentence, or sorry, the question. Okay, and then the last one I have here is a speaking assessment. So this one is speaking with the receptionist at a medical office. How to do this online, pre-teach any vocabulary, grammar, practice. And then I used the same process as I used with the listening. So for me, I used the breakout room feature on Zoom, which allows me to meet one-to-one. But again, you can do whatever works for you. Okay. And next, I did want to quickly share an excellent resource that I found. So this is for CLB levels 3 to 4. It has different resources that you can use from all skill sets, and it's called At the Walk-In Clinic. And I found it really useful in helping the students prepare, just learn new vocabulary about this topic. And it's from the Center for Canadian Language Benchmarks, so I highly recommend this. Okay, and then the last thing I would like to share today is how to make a PDF fillable. So in my example, I am showing a monthly reflection, but again, you could make a PDF fillable for a class worksheet if you would like. So just in case you don't know what a fillable PDF is, when the person who receives your PDF, they're able to open the PDF and they can change it. They can type in it or they can edit it in a way. Okay. So I will be sharing 2 different ways that you can make a PDF fillable. First, with the blue arrow, I'm going to show you how to add a checkbox. And second, I have the green arrow. I'm going to show you how to add a text line so that the students can write sentences. Okay. I find this a little bit easier than using a Word document because the lines get all shifted. But again, it totally depends on you, and it's not necessary, but it's just something that I found useful. Okay, so first, you need to create a Word document and save it as a PDF. So in case you don't know how to do that, you're just going to go to File, Save As, and then you're going to have a drop-down menu, and you want to select PDF as the format. Go to Google and go to pdfescape.com. Then you're going to third upload your file. So you click on Choose File, select the name of your file, and then click Upload. And yes, so this website has actually a number of different functions, so you can play around with it if you would like. But first, what you're going to do is click on Form Field, where the blue arrow is, and go to Checkbox and then Select. Okay, and the process is basically click, drag, and release, and we're going to see a quick demonstration of the first video. Okay, so that is a quick demo about how to add a checkbox. Now let's see how to add a text line. So it's the same process, click, drag, and release. And let's see the second video, please. Okay, thank you. So that's just a very quick demo. Those are two functions that you can use, but there are more if you wish to explore further. And yeah, as you can see, you can change the font as well. And anyway, that's everything. Thank you so much. Please send in your questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. That's fantastic. We have some time, ample time for our final Q&A now with all four of the speakers. And thank you for those sending your questions in. So we're going to open up our webcams, and then we'll do some individual questions and then maybe a little bit more of a group discussion. And you can continue to send your questions in, everyone, to the question box or by emailing a podal. Thanks very much, Alice, for helping manage the questions there. Okay, so we have some questions. Let's just stick with where we were with the assessment piece. So Elizabeth, do the students need any special software to fill out this fillable PDF? Like when they're doing the filling out, you create it, but do they need a software?
They just need to be able to view a PDF, which I think most people have. You don't have to pay, you can just have a viewer. And as long as they have that, then it's fine. They don't need any special software.
Okay, perfect, thanks. And another question, of course, this question comes up from a lot of people, and I know that there was a webinar on Tutela about a month ago now that did have a lot of great solutions on assessment. And this is something that many people are still just discovering what works. But the question, there were two questions actually about validity in online assessment. And I know that we're all just doing the best we can to maintain validity. And I think that's important to remember at this point. But one person asked about how you are preventing students from cheating? Although I don't know if I like to use that word, but how are you preventing students, how are you ensuring the validity of assessments, maybe is a better way of putting it, so that you can you know that that's what the student's skill set is in that point, at that point in time. Another related question was how do you ensure that someone else helps the student complete the assessment? I think Nancy might have meant, how do you ensure that no one is helping with the assessment? So Elizabeth, do you want to respond to that? And then maybe the rest of you can chip in as well.
Yes, I think that's a really important concern. So for me, I know my current group, and what I can see is when they return an assessment, for example, a reading or a writing assessment, I usually have an idea of how they are going to perform on that assessment in advance. So if I see a sparkling assessment, perfect, and I know their situation, then my alarm bell goes off, right? And anyway, something that you can do if you are worried about this is just have the assessments live. For example, I mentioned in my segment that I give reading and writing assessments for students to do on their own. You don't have to do that. If there is any doubt, just do it live with them. Okay, so you have the reading assessment there. They must complete it within the class time. And then you can know, I would say fairly confidently, that you're watching them complete it. You know that it was them and there was nobody in the background helping them,
Great. Would anyone else like to speak to how they, if you're doing assessments at this point, PBLA assessments, what you do to try to ensure that you're getting a valid assessment that is true to the learner's skills?
Well, I've only done listening and speaking, which is a little easier. So I had my students come on and do it one by one online and made sure nobody else was there. And then I gave them the feedback right away. So I haven't quite figured out the reading and writing yet, but those sound like good ideas.
And I'll second Sika there. Providing a listening speaking is quite easy with Microsoft Teams. I already know how to get on the chat chat thing. So doing a listening speaking via one-on-one is possible. Reading and writing is a lot more trickier. Usually you can hear their voice if they've written it themselves.
So just like Elizabeth, I'm well aware of my students' background, and most of the time they have young children. So chances that they don't have, someone to help them, and their wives are not native speakers as well. And so I do know sometimes if they do submit a piece of writing assessment, like, it's all perfect English, or it's something, an idea that I know that may not come from them, but it's been taken from the internet, I would actually question them, and I'll just send it back to them, and I'll actually get them to redo another piece of work for me. But it's so hard at this point in time to really, really ensure full validity, I thought. And when I create my Google Forms, sometimes it's just, if it's an assessment, they only get one attempt and that's it. So they have to make sure that's correct, usually. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Just as an interjection, somebody was asking about the PowerPoint slides. You can download the PowerPoint slides from the Handouts tab in the control panel box. And also, somebody asked about, could you repeat the website for creating fillable PDFs? That information Elizabeth has provided, and it's also in the notes section of the PowerPoint slides. So you will be able to access her videos again that way and review them if you need to. So moving back to assessment, which is a topic we can't just gloss over. There is a question about frequency. How often are you all doing assessments at this point? How frequently are you doing them? And give us, if you could, just a sample of how many hours, or like how many classes you have and how many hours a week you're with them. Let's start with you, Elizabeth, then Marilyn, okay. Jazz, and Mika. Just quick answers, maybe.
Sure. I'm teaching 2 groups, 1 hour per class per week, so 2 hours a week. How many assessments? It really depends on the topic, how the students are doing. It could be one assessment a week. It could be one assessment every 3 weeks. It really depends. I just try to read the class. I don't want to push them too much, but I also want to provide assessment opportunities. And I just try to have variety. So one day it's reading, the next time it's writing.
Hi, I'm just like Elizabeth. I do vary my tasks, and I actually have only one class, and I just meet them once a week, for 1 hour. And then as far as assessment, I think it's like one per week. Sometimes it's two, depending on what I've covered and whether or not they are quite familiar with the topic, I think. And most of the time, like when it comes to the topic has to do with the COVID-19, because there's so much input that's been given to them before the lockdown, they were able to manage a lot of the assessments on their own quite independently and very quickly as well. But when I actually started on like things such as after COVID, I went on to natural disasters, like forest fires, for example, because this is a season of forest fires in BC. It took a longer time for them to internalize some of the concepts and the idea about having forest fires. So it's like maybe after 2 weeks of lessons, then I'll actually give them a reading assessment or writing assessment.
So we only had about just over 2 months left in the school year, and then we go back in September. So when this all happened so quickly, just getting them onto routines and stuff took like a week or two. And so in terms of, I did not do any I tried to do reading and writing assessments, but like I said, the validity just was not possible. Listening and speaking, like I said, on one-on-one chat, you can do that. So that worked. But for reading and writing, I'd have to start in September and figure out a way to do those. Like I said, I tried, but I'd questioned the validity of what they gave me. It was clearly translated, a lot of the stuff.
Yeah, so my seniors class is a part-time class, 3 afternoons a week. So we usually do an assessment every 2 weeks. And we didn't get started right away just because we were easing into the online situation. So only got a couple done this year. But yeah, usually it's one every 2 weeks.
Okay, thanks everyone. That's so great because I think it adds perspective for people who are wondering, well, how many, how often, and how do I keep them valid and all of that. There are so many questions, and it's just nice to hear that, whatever you're doing is okay. Other people are doing this, so thank you for sharing. It just, I think, gives a bit of a parameter or barometer for us to see where we fit in. The next question, one more question about assessment before we move on, and this is about the Language Companion Binder, which is not yet in digital form. I know that there are different organizations across the country, including umbrella organizations that are bringing up this question of making this a digital portfolio. How can we make digital portfolios? There are also capabilities for digital portfolios within EduLink and the new website avenue.ca, which is going to support EduLink, Tutela, and a few other resources. But the question is from Romanin. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Sorry if not. Do you still ask your students to put all their online assessments in their portfolios? And maybe we could just get 1 or 2 responses on that.
Sure, for me, I don't have them do that because I feel it's just too overwhelming for a lot of them right now. About education and personally, there's too much going on. So I just keep a record of them, and I'm planning to, we'll have to see what happens in the future, but I'm planning on printing them out and then they can add them into their portfolio later.
Yeah, I haven't either. It's a bit of effort to get it put into the binder correctly, and so that's something that takes a little teacher direction. So I've been holding on to them, and hopefully I will get to see them in September.
Same here. I've got them at home, but in September when I see them face to face, we can put them all in their binders.
What I've done is actually I have a Google Drive, so I actually created a personal file for each one of them. And so what I've done is whenever it's an assessment, I also kind of download it and drag it into their file for each week. So actually, I do have a full complement of all the assessments. But at the same time, I wanted to teach them a sense of responsibility as adult learners. So I actually did ask them to, download their own assessments and put it in their files. And so recently, I just had a post conference with them, and they were able to kind of match, what I have on my record. So I actually was quite impressed with some of my students. Not all my students could do that, just some of them that could do it.
Great, thanks everyone. Yes, Karina, thank you for reminding us and pointing out that the language companion binder is available in PDF form as well. But in terms of the idea, I think, of putting that assessment paper into the binder and organizing it that way, it's good to hear what you're all doing in terms of that. So I just have a shout out for you, Sika. Someone is commenting on the importance of teamwork and giving you kudos. Because you shared inspirations and resources weekly with their team. I think this person is from Chilliwack. I hope I'm remembering where they're from. But anyway, you inspired the whole team in adjusting to the online environment. So they're sending you a shout out. Actually, that's from Nellie. So Nellie's saying thank you for that. And also, someone is asking how many hours you're teaching Sika in a week in order to assess every 2 weeks thereabouts, if that's what you end up doing.
Well, in our regular class, it's a 2.5-hour class 3 times a week. Online, I've been doing 2 1-hour sessions plus sending students some things to review on their own.
All right, so we have a lot of questions coming. This is so great, but we don't have a lot of time left. And the reason is because we want to try to keep this webinar under 75 minutes, just because we know how busy everyone is. And given that you do have really great questions, if you're all okay with it, presenters, I can share those with you in case we don't get through them all, which I don't think we will. And if you have even just 5 more minutes to provide answers, then I can share those out again with those who are participating in the webinar. But I'll check in with you after about that. So I want to just dig into a few more things that are a little more in depth with our last 5 minutes. So the question is about how to facilitate learning for students who may not have access to laptops. They might just have a smartphone to use. This is a great question, Nadine. So does anyone have any, one response on that? Sika, do you want to share what's happening for you with that? How you feel?
Well, I do have some students who only have smartphones, and so they're able to access the synchronous class on Jitsi Meet or Zoom. And then EduLink is a little more difficult on a phone. So what my students do is they take pictures or video of some of the activities that we do in class, and then they can review it later.
Yeah. My program actually lent out computers to the students. So I dropped them off, and at the end of our classes, we just picked them up again. So that really helped them, being able to borrow a device.
One thing that I found is that if a student has a smartphone and they know how to use it, they can attend class, they're getting English practice. I have some students who don't have a computer, but they don't have computer skills, but they're comfortable with their phone. So for me, I'm really happy if they're able to connect even by phone. And we do have a few extra laptops and an iPad that we are able to share for those who are able and interested.
Same here. IMSS will loan out laptops if needed to those students that don't have laptops. Yeah.
Okay, thanks everyone. So another question that came up, I know I've heard of this a little bit. Do you keep in touch with those learners who were in your classes pre-COVID-19, but that have opted out of the online language training? And if yes, what are some of the reasons that your learners maybe didn't transition? And how do how are you still in touch, and how much? Maybe is there one person who has a story on that?
Okay. Well, we have a training and activity coordinator who's been checking in, especially on some of the seniors, just as a weekly check-in on how they're doing. And they've actually encouraged some of the students to come and join the class. And so I guess that's worked well.
I have two students who haven't really wanted to participate online. They both have the tech skills, but they just prefer in person. I send out emails Monday to Thursday with bits that they can practice at home. And one student has just said, I don't want to be involved in an online class. I'm just going to wait, for in person. And I said, okay, but contact me if you need any assistance or you want to help practicing English. And then the other student has kind of warmed up a bit because she's realized that it's going to be a while for us to go back to in person. So she has been joining our Zoom classes.
I've just, my work email, they can email me there anytime. And so we still communicate through email. And I told them that their EduLink account is open and they can study on their own as well. They appreciate that.
I have a teacher assistant, so she actually keeps up with them. And so she just dialogue with them and asks what assistance she could offer to them.
Great, thank you for sharing those responses. So this is a final question, a good final question, I think. It's not every day that I get 4 amazing teachers together to share all of the hard work that they're doing to bring language training support to newcomers to British Columbia. And yeah, I just want to thank you all for all the hard work you do. And so this question is more about you. It is, what systemic changes do you think would better support you and teachers in settlement, support you and your other LINC staff and other settlement workers that work in your organizations? What do you need in LINC to better do your jobs and support learners?
I'm not sure if it counts as systemic, but I would definitely like to see some updated materials like the classroom activities that are used on EduLink, but BC specific and related to PBLA, and have some more resources to support teachers. And especially literacy.
Yeah, literacy resources in particular, yeah. Yeah, I know the Centre for Canadian Language Benchmarks is definitely working hard on developing a lot of those. And so everyone listening, please do check out Tutela. There is a lot of stuff there and teachers are sharing all of the work that they're doing, but good to hear that more of that would be beneficial. Any other things that would help you with your work in LINC, supporting learners?
I just have a great management team, and every year they've added a few more technical stuff. I even have a smart board in my classroom, and giving us training on EduLink, encouraging that. I'm a slow learner, but now I'm getting a little better every year. But it's been a lot of support, I think, just from the team, from the management team, just so much support and understanding of some of us old teachers who this is hit really hard, and just learning as we go.
Personally, I like to see how we can make laptops accessible to all the immigrant learners that are here, because I think being digitally literate is very critical in order to fit into the society and, to move on in this world. And I know some of them don't have it, and, I'm not sure how that can be done. I mean, I kind of suggested whether that could be a co-payment, or, could we find sponsors and then do a kind of a co-payment between the students and the organization itself, so that they could own a nice little Chromebook, for example, to help them work on, some of the assignments and all that. And I think what I would also like to see in the curriculum is that it is sort of this a curriculum on teaching them digital literacy as well. I think that's really important, because when the pandemic broke out, a lot of my colleagues were actually very stressed out, because they didn't know how, what platform to use, how to get the students to become digitally literate. So I thought that perhaps when things goes back to the new normal, if we could get a new normal, I think one of the key lessons to be taught is how to manipulate with all the various IT tools and platforms, so that if anything happens in the future, we don't have to panic or be so stressed out. The students could just go in and do all the assignments online.
Oh, and I was just going to say I agree with what everybody else has mentioned, especially resources. Teachers can always use more resources.
Okay, thank you. Really good to hear your opinions on that. Thanks so much. So I want to keep going, but we've already gone over time. This has been such a great webinar. I hope it was as fast-paced feeling for all of you listening in as it felt for me, and that you are just left wanting more. As I said, I will definitely send the extra questions to the panelists and hope that they will give even just a little bit more of their time. I know we've already you've already given so much. Thank you so much. So I'm going to conclude the webinar now. And I hope that these practical examples of what's working for these amazing teachers is going to help the rest of you with your work going forward. I will be emailing you all an online evaluation form. So please fill this out. It helps us to plan future events and trainings that meet your training needs. And please keep in mind that if you have any CLB related curricular needs, that the Centre for Canadian Language Benchmarks is a go-to for that. They are doing so many great things, lots of resources there. So I'll send that evaluation form out. Please fill it out. And next slide, please. Let's see if I can advance. Yeah. We'd like to thank Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada for sponsoring and funding this event. Thanks finally again to Sika, Marilyn, Jazz, and Elizabeth for all your time. A big thanks to the AMSA team, Connor Raslin, Alice Podel, and Melissa J on Twitter. And thank you everyone for joining the webinar, and take care out there.